I really appreciate, Ovide, you taking the time to come to Marina and meet with all of my constituents. I think it's very important for them to hear what you have to say, to make an informed decision. And Fran Wendelboe is here. I'm going to let her introduce Ovide, give you a little bit more information, background. They have a long kind of history and relationship, and I thought she could probably do him some justice.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeannie. Justice, that's an interesting word when you think of Ovide. First off, I've known Ovide for 20 years, and I will tell you that I didn't need to come here tonight to meet Ovide and decide whether or not to support him for governor, because he had my vote in the bag a long time ago, as soon as he decided to run. Ovide is a New Hampshire native, fourth generation New Hampshireite, and he'll tell you, came from a family of mill workers and dentists. If anything negative can be said about Ovide, and I do hear people say it,
Can I write this down?
Ovide is too nice to be in politics. It's absolutely true. What some of you might not know, that I didn't know until recently, was that Ovide actually did a stint as a teacher. For 3 years he taught social studies. That was fascinating.
And physics.
Oh, and I didn't hear about physics before he went to law school, and then of course he went to law school, and that's history. He currently practices as one of the key partners at Divine Millman, one of the most prestigious law firms in the state of New Hampshire. And you know, when we look at what is needed in a governor, there are 4 things. First is an understanding of the legislative branch, an understanding of the executive branch of government, and an understanding of the judicial branch. Well, certainly as an attorney, Ovide has the judicial branch down pat. He served in the New Hampshire legislature as legal counsel to the state senate in the early 90s, so he knows his way around the legislature. And as far as the executive branch, Ovide served as the chairman of the State Board of Education in the 90s as well. So he's got experience in all 3 branches of New Hampshire government. That is really critical in the role of a governor. The 4th thing that a governor needs is to be a governor with a heart. Somebody who really, truly cares about the people. And that's one thing, no matter what you want to say about John Lynch, it's the one thing that people keep going back to, that he just seems to have a real connection and care about the people. Well, Ovide is probably one of the leading people in the state for his giving as far as participation with nonprofits and charities. I can't even name all the boards. He was 2009 the Citizen of the Year with the Boy Scouts, the Daniel Webster Council. He served as a director with the Boy Scouts. He served as a director on CASA and the Mayhew program, and the New Hampshire Catholic Charities. The list goes on and on. The time that this man has given to charities and nonprofits in the state of New Hampshire. However, there's one more critical thing that a governor, particularly in this climate that we have economically, is business experience. And Ovide is a candidate that really has proven business experience. He was chairman of the board of directors of St. Mary's Bank. He's been on the foundation chair fundraising for several large entities. And I got to tell you, as an attorney, I'm sure he does a lot of litigation with businesses that are just crushed under the regulatory weight that government puts on them. So I can't think of anybody who has better business credentials than Ovide Lamontagne does. And I can't say any more about him that you probably...
I was going to say, you might as well just walk around and shake hands now.
Ovide Lamontagne for governor.
What a wonderful turnout. I really appreciate meeting Senator Forrester's constituents and being here in her lovely home, and her husband Keith. I really appreciate your opening over to us. And I have to say, I'm a fan and an admirer of Senator Forrester's. Jeannie brings not only smarts and principled leadership, but she brings great grace to the work of the legislature.
Yes.
Well, the state senator. She didn't pay me to say that. I've seen that up close and personal. And I think we can all agree that during difficult times, You need people who stay cool under pressure, who are grace under fire. And when I think of that, I think of Senator Jeanne Forrester. And we have a lot of work to do in New Hampshire, you know that. And we need to make sure we have the right people in Concord and in Washington who are going to stay focused on the merits and not be consumed by the passion or the heat of the debates. And that's a very important skill set to have. So I think I can bring that to the governor's office. I'd like to say a couple more things about myself. I've been happily married for 32 years to my first wife, Betty. And I know she'll shoot me now that I said that, and it's on GraniteGrok. My wife and I were college sweethearts. We were married right out of college, and then we became teachers. We didn't have any money to our name, and we just went on faith. And we taught for 3 years in Catholic high schools, and both in Maryland and then in Wyoming. My high school teacher at Trinity High School became principal of a Catholic high school out there. And he called me and Betty and said, I need a math and a social studies teacher. Of course, Betty, being the computer science summa cum laude major, was the science teacher. He really wanted her. And he said, well, you can bring Ovide along with you. Social studies. Well, I also had a minor in science, so when I got to Cheyenne, they needed a physics teacher too. So I taught physics. And one of my students, by the way, is now an astrophysicist in Arizona. Anyways, and that had not very little to do with me. I love the teaching profession, and then I went to law school in Wyoming and worked there for 3 years as a law student. Then I clerked for a judge for our fourth year or fifth year in Wyoming, and then came back to New Hampshire when my first child was born. We're adoptive parents. We adopted our first child in Wyoming from Wyoming Catholic Charities, and adopted our second daughter in New Hampshire when we came back. But a funny thing happened on the way back to New Hampshire. The people who lived next door to my parents called us up in the summer of '86 and said, we know you're coming back. We're selling our little house we've been in for 15 years next door to your parents, and we put an exclusion in our real estate agreement that says if we can sell directly to you, we don't have to pay a real estate fee. He said, well, what makes you think we'd do that? Oh, it's on a wing and a prayer. Well, sure enough, we bought that house. We moved in next door to my parents, and in 1997, my mother said, I'm the oldest of 8, and they were in a big house. My mother said, I'm tired of the big house. I'm thinking of moving out. I said, I got a deal for you. I'll buy your house and rent our little house to you. So 1997, the moving truck comes over to our house, packs the first half of it, moves around the corner, packs the second half, back around the corner. 4 hours, the 2 families will move. And for 26 years, we've been next door neighbors to my parents. I live in the same house I grew up in the same neighborhood I grew up in. And if you've ever seen the show Everybody Loves Raymond, yeah, that's us. And it's even funnier and sometimes sadder when as the time goes on. But it's just been great living in the same, the same neighborhood. And that's the New Hampshire tradition in a lot of ways. Families connecting with each other and neighbors becoming part of the family, even though they weren't biologically related. We have what is been called social capital in New Hampshire, because people work together at the local level in communities and in our state. And I think we had a critical time in New Hampshire's history, in our nation's history for sure, but in New Hampshire's history, to bring together the best and the brightest in the private sector, to work with government leaders, to reform state government, and put us on a track of independence, if you will, economic prosperity that really distinguishes us as a state from other states in the region and nationally. I don't know about you, but I'm very concerned about the direction of our country. And there's no guarantee that we're going to change who the President of the United States is come 2013. However, I'm committed to making sure Barack Obama is a one-term president. How about you? And some of you know that I ran for the United States Senate in 2010. And we came up a little short, but we're not going to come up short this time, I hope, with your help, certainly. But I ran for the United States Senate because I was desperately concerned about how government in Washington was out of control, excessive spending, government overreach in areas that the federal government doesn't belong. And I wanted to go to Washington and bring our government back into the 4 corners of the Constitution, really break down a lot of the bureaucracy that's built up there and transfer power back to the states and the people where it belongs. Under the 10th Amendment, those powers that are not expressly delegated to the federal government are to be reserved to the states and the people. And we're based on a system of dual sovereignty in the United States. That federal government has some, limited powers. But the states are sovereign unto themselves as part of the federal system. And so running for governor for me is the other side of the same coin that motivated me to run for the U.S. Senate. And that's to be a leader for the state of New Hampshire that says to Uncle Sam, it's time to get out of the classroom, it's time to get out of the operating room, and it's time to get out of the boardrooms of our state's businesses. And we don't do that disrespectfully. We do it respectfully. We stand on the Constitution when we say that. There's no place in the Constitution where you'll find an enumerated power that says to Washington that it can tell us how to teach our children. I testified in Congress in the mid-90s when it wasn't cool to be conservative, by the way. Anybody wants to go back to the headlines back then, it was not cool to be conservative. But I went there to testify that Congress should abolish the U.S. Department of Education, block grant federal dollars to New Hampshire, let us design our educational system ourselves. And what was shocking to me when I was chairman of the state board is when I talked to our Commissioner of Education, who was no conservative, Betty Toomey, fine woman, good professional, and I said to her, we have 300 plus employees in the State Department of Education. Can we deputize these people to go into the school districts in our neediest communities and work with teachers and do teacher training and help with curriculum development? And she paused and she cocked her head and looked at me and said, are you kidding? She says, this New Hampshire Department of Education is a federal outpost. Most of the people here have jobs that are paid in whole or in part by federal grant programs. And I have no discretion about how to deploy them. They're here to do Washington's work. I couldn't believe it, and yet it is true. And it is true in other parts of our state's government. We need to find ways to go on our own, not, again, in derogation of our federal system, but in support of it, in support of our federal system, and to make New Hampshire an exceptional state. I wrote an op-ed that was published last week in the Union Leader, and there's copies of it on the table on the way out if you'd like to read it. And it sets out some of my vision for New Hampshire, standing out as an exceptional state. The New Hampshire advantage, you know and I know, is about limited government, low taxes, no broad-based taxes particularly, and having the most robust economic environment for people to work, to create a business, to grow a business, and to raise their families and to live. The default position is we trust ourselves, not government. We work with each other. Government has a role, but we become an entitlement society. And I dare say we become an entitlement society even in New Hampshire. Think about the fact that 50 years ago, the President of the United States, in his inaugural address, said two quite remarkable things. One was to acknowledge that America was under assault around the world, particularly by communist forces at that time, because we're based on the radical proposition that we believe the rights of man come not from the generosity of the state, but from the hand of God. And that president went on to exhort the people, us, you and me, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That president was John F. Kennedy, a Democrat. I dare say be a Republican today. And at that time, he was calling on us to go to the moon. He, in fact, predicted what we did to go to the moon. There was no U.S. Department of Education or U.S. Department of Energy or EPA, and people depended on each other, much more so. We need to reclaim that sense of the rightful place of the people over government that I think served us well until really the Great Society years of the mid-60s until the present time. And we need to say to each other that we're going to stand together, make government work well, reform state government, but do it in a way that affirms the quality of life here in New Hampshire. I think reforming state government has to be a top priority. Our legislature this last session did a good job in doing the math. Here's what we expect to be the revenues, and this is what we're going to spend. But we didn't get a chance to really do anything in terms of structural reform of state government. We're very siloed in state government. You see public contracting go out from state government. Depending on what department it is, you'll see a whole different set of rules and a whole different set of pre-qualifications for our contractors, to the point where we exclude our own contractors from participating in, oftentimes, for public contracting. We have systems in place that are antiquated and predate the World War I. Our own World War II, our own budgeting system in New Hampshire is antiquated. It's a maintenance budget, we say. The legislature starts, the default position is we do it, whatever we've been doing for the last 50 years, the same. I say we have to have zero-based budgeting, challenge everything we do, and ask how can we do this better? Are there departments that should be consolidated? Are there operations that really should be privatized? Why does the Department of Transportation have drilling equipment? Don't we have private contractors that could be hired and contracted by state government to do some of the things that we even do in state government now? So that's just the beginning, and I think of what we need to do, and that is to evaluate the delivery system of state government. And then to find ways of reforming our educational system. Again, we've got an educational system, the laws were written back after World War I. When New Hampshire people, not because Washington told us to change, but we realized that our students were not doing as well as students from around the country when they went to war. They weren't able to read and write the way other students were, and we said we're going to come up with a whole new delivery system. Well, I think we have an opportunity to create a delivery system that makes New Hampshire students not just first in the country, first in the world. And don't you think we owe that to our children? Yeah. Competitive with world standards, not because we're adopting world standards, but because we adopt our standards, and lift our children up by giving them the best skills possible to compete in the workplace, to become entrepreneurs themselves. And I have faith in our faculty and our leadership at the school level, but we need to free them to do what needs to be done, not continue to burden them with a lot of the rules and regulations that we have. There's a lot of other things I could talk about, and I'd be happy to answer questions, and I think that's really what these parties give you a chance to do. But I want to invite you to join our team. I have a website, it's ovide2010.com. Don't forget the E, OVIDE 20, excuse me, I say 2010. Like I said, it's the other side of the coin. Ovide2012.com, OVIDE2012.com. That's our website. If you haven't signed up yet to be kept up to date on what we're doing, please do that. We're also developing a network of I would call them, it's an O Depot network. And I have JP Marzullo here who's helping us organize our field, and his lovely wife Donna's by his side. Oh, there you are. Oh, thank you. What we're doing is we're recruiting families or businesses in every voting precinct of the state who are willing to be our ambassadors and to be the point of distribution for lawn signs and bumper stickers and paraphernalia for the campaign, and also to be my eyes and ears and to be my voice during the course of the campaign. You know what's going to happen. As the campaign enrolls, particularly in the general election, if we're successful in the primary, attacks will come. There'll be distortions, there'll be exaggerations. We'll need people at every voting precinct level to be able to tell the truth, to do it one person to one person. And that's the kind of level of grassroots organization we're establishing now. We've gone a long way to developing this O Depot network. But if you want to help me, you can help us by volunteering to be an O Depot, and on the way out you can speak to JP. And then lastly, of course, financial resources are very important for a campaign. I am pleased to say we've got a very good pace of fundraising going on that will be more than competitive with any Democratic nominee for governor. But we need the resources to get the message out, to hire appropriate staff, and ultimately to make sure that we can win in November so we can govern afterwards. And if you sign up with me now, I'd ask you to make the commitment to help me serve. There's no way one person, and especially in New Hampshire, the weak form of governor, can do it alone. And I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't even know all the questions. But I know how to have the questions identified and get to the answers. But I need people to help me govern, to be my eyes and ears in the community communities of our state, to find out what's happening, and to be able to work with us as we bring the resources of our state, which go well beyond government, to bear, to provide for the best state in the world, if not the country, to live in, and to raise a family, and to operate a business. So I want to thank you again for coming here tonight. It's wonderful, and to the Forresters, thank you for opening up your beautiful home. Betty and I had 8 presidential receptions in our home during the election, the primary cycle. Almost 2,000 people came through, and I know how much work it takes to do a reception, and I'm grateful very much to you, Jeannie and Keith, for your hospitality, your warmth, and your friendship. So thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
GrokTV.